Gifted Talks Fundraising offers you a seat at the table for a relaxed chat about what it takes to build successful giving programs. Marshalling decades of practical hands-on experience, the Gifted Directors provide helpful advice and top tips for achieving your fundraising goals. Welcome to Gifted Conversations. Here we are once again at 1 Mill Street. And really unusually in this day and age, I'm actually in person with my work colleagues and fellow directors, Amy Stevens and Chris Goldie. We've known each other for decades and work intensively across a whole range of projects and supporting our clients with our gifted team. But it's unusual for us to be face to face. So welcome, Amy. Thanks for coming all the way from Leeds to join us here at 1 Mill Street.
No, good to see you both. It's I think since COVID we do too much online, don't we? And need to get together in person more often.
Yeah, and it's always dangerous when we bring Chris Goldie into the fray, apart from us starting to talk about cricket, mate. Welcome, thanks for coming up from London.
My pleasure. Always nice coming to sunny Royal Leamington Spa. Not so sunny today, but it's great actually, as Amy says, and you both say, it's great to be in person having a chat because we aren't doing it enough. And not just amongst ourselves, but with our clients as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And today, as we're doing over a cup of coffee, we just want to sort of really take some time to have a bit of a conversation about some of the things we deal with all the time with our clients that are really important, and actually just share some experiences. And today, this particular session, we're going to be talking about the dreaded prospect evaluation and rating, which sounds very sort of clinical and structured, but it's really about trying to work out who to ask, when, and for how much money. But in context terms, Chris, do you want to talk about where initially, what sort of fundraising are we talking about when we're using the tools around prospect evaluation and rating?
Well, we're predominantly talking about major gift fundraising, capital fundraising, because that is where you need to identify those who you think have the greatest capacity to give you the greatest amount of money. But actually, I think it applies across all of your fundraising, if I'm being brutally honest. You need to know who your most likely prospects are, whether they're going to be major donor prospects and give you hundreds of thousands, or whether they're going to be minor prospects and give you £10 a month. You still need to understand that you're aiming in the right direction.
Very true. And it's often forgotten, Amy, that capital fundraising is about raising a really relatively large sum of money in a relatively short space of time for something very specific. And so this is a vital tool in that process. We start with a feasibility study. Do you want to talk a bit about what you're looking for when you do a feasibility study and what sort of outcomes can we expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So feasibility study is some key questions, predominantly that case for support. So what is it we're trying to do and why? And most importantly, do people believe in that vision? And one of the things we see throughout the feasibility studies, which highlights the importance, which I've seen recently with a client, is the focus of that case and how that can actually change. And when you do the study and you consult with interested parties, sometimes the part of your project you didn't realise was so appealing to people is actually what you should be focusing on.
Yeah.
And so that's the first key question, I think, for the study.
Doing some listening before you do some asking.
Absolutely.
And can really be helpful. But there's also an opportunity, is there not, Chris, to understand, if you like, the donor motivations, the thinking, what will get people to give to this particular project, isn't there?
Yeah, of course there is, and it links back to what Amy was saying before, that you should never start fundraising for things that people do not want to support. It's pretty obvious to us who do it all the time, but sometimes we go into clients and they've got a project that they think is the best thing since sliced bread. That's what they want to do, and actually we then go and talk to the people who they think will support them, who go, no, that's not it. I'd had a schools project very recently where it was clear what the school wanted to do, what the school thought the best thing to do was. The people we spoke to said, yeah, it's not a bad idea, but it's probably more money than we think it's worth. And actually, the school's got other priorities. And that then has taken us down a different path with the school, who are now getting on with doing more effective fundraising aimed at things that people actually want to give money for. And this is where the study becomes really important, understanding why and what will motivate people to give.
Yeah.
That's tough sometimes, though, isn't it? Because we have to deliver those, what can be a brutal message in that actually this is not the project for your donors.
Yeah.
But I think it's our responsibility, isn't it, as as their consultants and their fundraisers to set them on the right route.
How many times have we seen thermometers, those dreaded thermometers stuck up outside a church that needs a roof replacing, and no one is giving to it because there hasn't been that consultation or understanding?
Absolutely. Well, I worked on a project a number of years ago before Gifted, a church, lovely church. The church authorities had decided they knew what they wanted, but they'd not spoken to people in this community, and it was a community that was predominantly non-worshippers, but people who loved the church, very beautiful part of the country, loved the church, loved having their daughters' weddings there or their christenings, or go there on Christmas Eve for midnight mass. But the church hadn't spoken to them, but they expected these people to give, and they just weren't motivated by it. They didn't want to do it. And we had to, it was only once we went and spoke to people, understood why they were opposed to the project or what they needed to do to change the project, that actually money started to flow through.
Then the case can be crafted accordingly.
Absolutely.
But we've seen some really bizarre donor motivations, haven't we? And when you get into study interviews, you get an understanding about why people are giving. I mean, the obvious one is, altruism. They're doing it because it's something they really believe in. It's the right thing to do. They've got a philanthropic, if you like, urge to do to give. But there's been some others, Amy, haven't there?
Oh gosh, we've had some funny ones. Can you remember the one, the cathedral, where somebody funded the toilets?
Yes.
And had a very specific reason, so his name would be there and everyone would see it at certain times.
Yeah.
That was a good one. But gosh, yeah, people give for all different reasons, don't they? Whether it's genuine altruism or, some reciprocal giving, which is something we see so much of, isn't it, with major gifts, particularly in business networks.
So they're paying back, really, because a wealthy friend's asked them to give to their charity, then they feel obliged to, go and ask them to support theirs.
And I think sometimes it's definitely a stitch up, isn't it?
Yeah.
He owes me one, right? He's going to have to give to this now.
Yeah.
And that interest, that's a very old-fashioned way of fundraising. When I started in the not-for-profit sector back in the 80s, that was very much the principle that people used to work to. He supported my charity, I'm going to support his charity, and vice versa. I think the other one, one that you see a lot of in the state school sector, in the grammar school sector these days, and I got ticked off by a state school for saying it, but it's true, is guilt.
Yeah.
Particularly in the southeast, the home counties.
In what way? Because they're not paying school fees when they could? Is that it? Okay.
Particularly if you look around the home counties, where you've got a lot of parents who live and work in London, are very successful, whose kids go to private schools through to the age of 11 when they sit the 11 plus. They pass the 11 plus, they go to the local grammar school. Yeah. And the parents, I had one parent sit in a very smart office in Mayfair in his hedge fund. He said, well, quite frankly, my wife and I feel guilty that our son goes to this school.
But you get the reverse too with independent schools on the tax, because another motivation is to actually direct through gift aid their tax to that particular charity. And parents that are paying fees at independent schools actually quite like the idea as charities that they can use gift aid to actually make sure some of their tax comes back to the school.
Yeah.
That's, tax benefits is another one, isn't it?
And I think regionally there's differences as well. So particularly, you guys know me, proud Northern girl.
Yes, indeed.
We are quite tribal.
Yeah.
And there's been
I never believe that.
a number of projects that I've worked on in towns or cities, particularly in the north, where people are giving back purely to a project purely because this is my hometown. Our city, and it's important to me.
I had that, I think I've shared this with you, but in Australia, a big care facility in a rural town, again, very, very tribal. But it was also that marking of a change of generation. The care home had run a big capital campaign, 15, 20 years earlier, and there was the donor board, the recognition with every name of every family at the time, and they listed the amounts next to on the board that they'd given. I thought this was a bit rich, and thought maybe they'd want to soften that a little this time around and actually just put the names up. No way. The feedback in the study, and this is where the study was really important, was no, we want to list the amounts again. That there has been a change effectively, and there are families that have gone wealthier and others that haven't, and we want it to be absolutely clear what the ranking is.
Yeah.
And I had not a dissimilar situation working for a big theatre 10, 12 years ago. I was sitting in my office, the phone rang, elderly lady on the phone said, "Now then," she said, "I gave to the last campaign, as did my friends, and they're on a board and I'm not. why is that? And I said, well, they must have given more than you. She said, well, how much did it, did they give? I said, well, I'll have to check the records. Went and checked the records, went back to it. I said, this is what they gave, and this is what was the minimum level to be on the board. Said, right, well, put me down for that amount in this campaign. I'm assuming you're going to have a board again. Brilliant motivation. But she was of the age, and I think we're seeing a change where actually people are less inclined to want to put their names to things and appear on boards. I've had the reverse not so long ago with some parents who gave a considerable amount of money to a school, but then they didn't want to be involved in the campaign because actually they felt that people looked at them slightly jealously.
Yeah, and it is a marker. I mean, it's some of it, though, in recognition terms, is more about shaping rather than naming. So, for example, a major donors, there's a school building a hall, they offered the major donors the opportunity to put a quote on the main pillars. So all the students go in and out of this hall every day and would be passing this philosophical quote, and the donor got to choose the quote. And
That's nice.
It wasn't Liverpool's whatever football club's mantra or whatever it could have been, but it was really, and going back there now, it's really stood the test of time as a form of recognition.
Yeah.
And I think that element of creativity, we're seeing that a lot across the sector now, where people look, if you take what used to be the buy a brick type of mechanism, increasingly you're seeing different clients taking the basic approach. What can we have that's low level that somebody can put their name on that will last for a very long time, but actually can we be creative? And I look at my career now, I think I've got my name in 3 different places and they're all in 3 very different things. Yeah. But none of them are bricks in walls. No, and that's nice. And hopefully, my grandkids one day might go to these places and think, Dad was involved in that, or Granddad was involved in that, and I think that's really important.
I've seen the spite thing as well. I don't know if you've come across this, where I thought I'd secured a gift from said husband, who then goes home and said wife goes, no, you're not. We'll take half of that and give it to my charity. Sort of, there's a certain amount of it's often very interesting, the dynamics that come forward. And
let's not forget genuine altruism. I've had a fabulous donor for one of my clients over the last few years who, the recipients of her grant money, what can we do? How can we recognise? I just want to know the difference it made. And which is really special when that happens.
I think it is, and I think there are, actually they get a lot of stick, but very wealthy people very often do give away a lot of their money to be simply altruistic.
Absolutely.
And they'll have things they're particularly keen to support.
Yeah.
But they are not motivated by the recognition directly. They're not motivated by any personal connection directly. What they want to do is give money to the best causes, in their opinion.
And in a way, we're talking here not just about individuals, but corporates and grant funders. So the study is a really good opportunity, if you like, to just listen and get a clearer fix on who your prospects might be for that project, understanding you're probably refining and fine-tuning your case, as you were saying earlier, to be actually really what will motivate giving, as opposed to necessarily what the client organisation may specifically want. And that ends up giving us an urgent and compelling case and a list of names of organisations, individuals and grant funders that we can go to, and hopefully improved access. So it's a really powerful place to start. But it's not going to quite get us into the practical. Now we've agreed, let's say, and the client signed off and says, right, go ahead, we're going to run this campaign or major gifts program. They're settled on a target. They've confirmed what the case is going to be. Let's imagine we're at that stage. Now we've all been campaign managers, the 3 of us. Gosh, we've had some fun campaigns over the years where we're in the hot seat, and it is one of those really tough jobs, isn't it? You lose sleep as a campaign manager, and actually there's a great satisfaction as well when you get to target, because you've really changed some things. But the challenge always is, because everything's urgent, isn't it? Everything is like, got to be done now. But discerning what is important, understanding who should be asked next and for how much money is a big part of good campaign management. So one of the steps we do is go into what's called prospect evaluation. So Amy, what sort of things are we doing when we do what is described as prospect evaluation?
So we're really setting the scene for, like you say, who are we going to ask and when. And that's determining, is that prospect ready to be asked, and are they likely to support this project? So different things we consider. Capacity, obviously, is one. But that can be tricky, can't it? Because, on paper, somebody might have a net wealth of X amount, but actually, do we really know what's committed? Do we, what, they actually have the capacity to part with? But as best we can, we look at that. Are they interested in the cause? Do we have access to them? All these are the things we start to look at and map out to see who our first targets are.
That's funny, that capacity piece, isn't it, Chris? Because it's not just a question of seeing who's got the biggest cars in the school car park, or lives in the biggest house, because very often they could be stretched. They might have borrowed a lot of money for those assets, and they have nothing in the fridge, no food.
Well, I think we all,
on the other hand,
three of us have been to fantastic stately homes, manses in Scotland, wherever, where you've sat in a kitchen that's freezing cold, the rest of the house is completely empty because it's all asset rich and cash poor. And I think we've got to recognise that, and that's again part of that study process. I think the nice position that we're in, all three of us having done this for a long time, is there are certain things that we almost know before we start, and that we can guide our clients. So when you're putting together the interview list for a study, you're able to say, well, actually, can we look in these directions, because we sort of know that a lot of people aren't going to count. Let's take schools. I am absolutely crystal clear to me now that probably 60% of parents in independent schools are not going to be givers to a major gift capital campaign. Not in any significant way. It's not because they don't want to, but because they're spending more and more of their money on school fees, and that's what it is. So it is about focus, and it's about understanding that capacity, and then using the study to be able to understand and a scale of giving to say, this is, if I gave this amount of money, is this the tax saving that I make? And that's a very good guide. Now, when we used to do study interviews in person, we used the old pen and pencil trick, didn't we?
We did.
Now online, which more and more of them are, it's a bit more about us controlling the cursor.
Just to explain that for the benefits of our listeners, the pen and pencil trick is where you've got the scale of giving down on the table, and then what do you do with it?
Well, generally speaking, an individual will ask a question based around where they see themselves giving. So if they say, okay, so what you're saying to me is if I give £8,000 a year, the school gets £10,000 a year, and I'm saving a further £2,000. And it's a pledge period of 5 years. So we were able to go away from that and go, well, this donor should be in that 50,000 capacity.
Okay. So, but you're talking numbers by pointing.
They are.
At the scale.
Well, they are. They're people. They're pointing in that, because very often people would hold a pencil and hover around a level.
They do. That's true. So true.
I always start with the top line when I'm explaining the scale. You never know, do you?
Absolutely, and I think that's the case.
You can't talk it up, but you can let it drift down. No, I agree. Well done, Amy.
And when you take your notes, when you fill in your notes afterwards, I find it very useful now almost to categorise the interviewees into A, B, C, or D, because one of the things I think it's good to be able to say to the clients is, even though the interviews themselves are confidential and we're not asking people for money, is perhaps you want to start with this group of 10 first.
Get it rolling. And actually, in simple terms as well, in the study interview, you do get an understanding about who they also know and what the gossip is, because it's a confidential conversation. For example, I mean, we people can look wealthy, but actually all their money is committed in a business venture. They don't yet feel that they're wealthy to make the lifetime gift we're looking for. So intel on so and so is going to be selling their business, or they're about to inherit, or they've struck a fantastic new deal. And it's in those windows that they're suddenly wealthy. So understanding when to ask is also some of the feedback you're getting.
That timing element is critical, and I had that last year with a major donor, or potential major donor, and someone said, yes, they've got the money, but don't ask now because they're doing X, and there was a big business situation going on. I said he'll say no because he's too consumed with that. So just sit tight. So like you say, that background intel can be critical.
And that all feeds back into the evaluation, doesn't it? That's as responsible consultants, what we need to do is give our clients the best possible advice. And within that is exactly that. This person will give, but he may not give for a year because of X, Y, and Z. And that's part of that evaluation process. So capacity, yes, we know they're rich. But there are lots of people who are rich that we don't know any more about them. That doesn't make them...
No, it's the old sheep and goats thing, isn't it? Just because they're rich doesn't mean they're going to give. likewise, you can have people that on all, like, you know, Warren Buffett lives in a very old house and drives a very old car, and he's one of the wealthiest guys in the world. And we've seen that time and time again, where the widows people who don't look like they've got a lot of money end up being extraordinarily
Well, can you
generous.
remember that legacy ask I did for a church client a few years back? And a very modest bungalow. This chap said he wanted to have a chat, and he said, I've left everything and it's 1.5 million.
Boom.
And you wouldn't have had a clue.
I
you just don't know, do you?
And that is, I think it's really important. Again, a client a few years ago where, you know, the largest individual gift came from somebody who literally nobody knew.
Yeah.
You know, they were friends of, but when I sat down with the leaders of the friends group, we again categorised people who should we speak to. These guys were at the bottom of Group C. You know, nobody knew who the hell they were. They came to an event, and within a week they'd committed, you know, a large 5-figure gift, which was far more than any other friends were going to do. But they just were unknown. So it was, you know, but they had the capacity, and we didn't know that until they came forward. And equally, in a study, we can go and identify that.
And also part of this evaluation process is looking very carefully about who should be doing the asking, and who's got the right, you know, influence, if you like, with the prospect. And that comes out in the study as well. Sometimes it's about the institutional leaders, the head of the school, you know, the director at a charity, the dean at a cathedral. They've got institutional leverage. But also, if you've got someone asking and they're saying, join me, and they're giving at about the level you think this prospect will give at, it's much more powerful. And equally, it can be someone that's got, you know, is their next door neighbour or their, do you know what I mean? But you really need to use the evaluation stage to understand who's best to ask, don't you?
I think that helps as well prepare our clients and our volunteer leaders. So as we know, some of them are nervous about asking. So as fundraisers and with the fundraising professionals we work with, having done that evaluation process, to then be able to give that one page, this is who you're asking, this is their interests, this is why, this is the research we've done, this is how we know they're ready, gives that asker the confidence and the power to go ahead and do that. Yeah,
and it's why we always say, you know, go to that low-hanging fruit first and foremost. You know, go to the ones where you're most likely to get a positive response. Because once you've got the first one, you're going to get the second one, and then you're going to get the third and the fourth and the fifth. And suddenly, as a volunteer, who was terrified of doing any asking 3 months before, now you're quite comfortable because you understand the process.
Yeah.
But that all comes back to you understanding who your best prospects are, what they're likely to give, what capacity they're at, and not wasting your time and effort. And this is really true, I think, of, let's call them chief executives of it, of whether it's a school, whether it's a cathedral, whether it's a hospital, whatever it might be. They are busy people. And what you don't want is them wasting their time pursuing, you know, dark alleyways, blind alleyways that simply aren't going to produce money. Whereas actually, if you've got a really clear focus on your prospects, on your best prospects, and that's their time, this is what you're going to do, that's how you're going to get the gift.
And we know just from years and years of doing this that capital campaigns are won based on 10 gifts.
Yep.
And that can bring in as much as half the target.
Yeah.
So being really thoughtful in preparing, researching, considering who to ask and for how much is vital. The rating stage is the other piece for how much. How much do you ask for? And where, you know, the understanding that you don't want to cause offence, you know, as the other risk that is always there. To be honest with you, I've never offended anybody for going in and having them being asked for, you know, a large gift.
Too much.
Sometimes you can offend people by not asking for enough, I guess. And I should just say this isn't a sales process, is it? I mean, this is why the volunteer who's giving and saying "join me" is the most successful asker. Whereas a salesperson, a professional that can be as slick as anything, just gets brushed off.
There is, you know, and we reflect it in our Gifted Asking book, there is a process and there is a training process. We all three of us have run very successful workshops with clients that are a day long that demystifies asking and runs through the process. Cultivation, the join me message, the leadership by example, all of these factors help to secure major gifts. And as you said, Andrew, if you're embarking on a capital campaign, the likelihood is you're going to get the majority of your funding from a relatively small number of people. The other thing I'll say of that, and it comes back to the feasibility studies, is, and we've had clients say this to us more than once, I wish I'd done more study interviews.
Yeah.
Because actually the people who you cultivate in a study interview, who you engage in the project, are very often your lead donors.
Yeah. Amy, we, in Gifted Asking, our little booklet, we talk about in rating, understanding, looking at the propensity to give. Can you just take us through what sort of things do you look at when you're assessing a prospect to see what their propensity or likelihood of giving? Where do you go to find that sort of information?
Well, we look at what they've given previously. Have they given to that specific charity before, for starters, or have they given to similar charities? So are they renowned for giving within the health sector, for example?
You can see that just on the donor boards, can't you?
Absolutely.
Annual reports
bit
and
of
all sorts
online
of
research.
A bit of gossip as well. You can usually pick
There's no great wealth digging there, is there?
Yeah.
But I think, as Chris mentioned, engaging those people in interviews is by far the best way to do it, though, because you start to understand their motivations and how it might work. And I think sometimes with donors, when we're looking at, okay, we know, let's say it is medical, they're keen for medical. What might get that gift over the line?
Yeah.
And one thing I particularly like to use is with capital projects is the naming recognition.
Yeah.
So, naming recognition isn't for everybody, but a specific element of a hospital project, for example, is it, I had one once which was the bereavement suite, and there was a real family, personal focus behind it, which inspired somebody to give. So it wasn't actually the overall hospital concept, it was the bereavement suite that had that personal element.
That makes sense. And it makes perfect sense, and that's really around their interest in that particular part of the campaign, and working and rating them, if you like, and their propensity to give. I guess you take those soundings, you look out there, and we come across in using the scale of giving, because of the focus obviously on those top 10 gifts, the major gifts being so important. Understanding whether people have given that much elsewhere is really important when you're looking about that suite, for example. If they've been giving previously at that level to the charity, that means they're going to get us a good score that they're capable of giving one of those top 10 gifts. But equally, we do see this where there are people that have been chased as major gift prospects because the charity thinks they're wealthy and they've been so friendly to the organisation, but they've given very little. They consume an enormous amount of fundraising resource, staff time and cultivation effort, but don't pay off. I think one of the toughest things is to say to a client, forget them.
Yeah.
Just be nice, but move on. Focus on where you, through rating, where you think you're going to get the gifts.
Yeah, but I think we do see that a lot, and that's because there are people, and it's human nature, who become very involved at the volunteer level. One of the things that we see a lot of in this country that you don't necessarily see in the States is that concept of I give my time. I give a lot of my time. Whereas in the States, it's much more I give my time and I give some money. Here, there's a lot of I give my time and that's it. I don't need to give any money. And actually, when you're in major gift fundraising mode, you need everybody that's committed to be giving something.
That's so true.
And until we get to that point, and it's important when you put together trustee bodies, when you put together campaign boards, you can't put people on a campaign board simply because they've been around for a long time and they're lovely people and they support the cause. What you need them to do is commit up front. So again, and this maybe is the advantage of being a consultant sometimes, is we can deliver that message to other governors, chairs of governors, heads, chief execs, call them what you will, and say, if you're going to put a development board together, campaign board together, there are certain key boxes that need to be ticked.
And if we look back at the campaigns that go on to achieve target, in almost every single case there's been strong leadership. By that I mean giving money, not just time, from the leadership group, the board or whatever of the client.
It's so important, and I have literally seen this in the last few weeks with a cultural heritage client of ours. We needed to find a match gift for a major grant very, very quickly.
Right.
I had 7 days to find the gift.
7 days?
Yeah. And in the end, one donor stepped up and did the whole amount. But of the people I spoke to within leadership and some of the key kind of figures in the organisation, 3 came forward immediately and said, I can't do the whole amount, but I can give X and we can do it together. And that kind of message is so important, and they will reach target because they're committed to making it happen. It
doesn't, and it really shows that there's leadership by example is driving it.
But again, understanding your prospects, because you're not going to offend somebody by going in and saying, "Will you help us? Will you be one of a group of people that are going to give?"
No,
they're much more. And if in their mindset they were going to give £5,000, but actually if they understand that if 5 people get together and give £10,000, that's what you need, they're much more inclined to do it. And they're not going to offend.
You're not just picking a number. There's a reason.
There's a reason behind it. There's a rationale behind it. And I am quite a fan of. I think we all are, of occasionally be able to say to somebody, okay, well, if you give us X, this is what it's going to mean. So it's not a direct gift, but it's a sort of tangible.
Exactly. So in drawing these thoughts together, as we just wrap up our first conversation in inverted commas, we use a schedule, don't we? It's just a simple spreadsheet where we've got those 4 criteria. Yep. So we list the names and of every prospect that we've got dredged up through the feasibility study and through other research. They're all the ones that we have got clearly identified. Then we've got the 4 criteria: people's capacity to give, people's interest in the project, people's propensity, i.e. are they givers or not givers, and then finally access. Most importantly, can we reach them? Do we know their phone number? Who would be able to talk to them? And then we score in each case out of 25 across those 4 criteria, and giving us a number on the end out of 100. Now, I find that schedule incredibly useful, and I will, by the way, be sticking a link to our website so that people can get a copy of that schedule if they want to use it in their own campaigns. But how do you use that schedule, Amy? How important is it to you, and is it something that helps you in running campaigns?
Definitely. I think the most important thing is that it gives structure. We've had clients say, gosh, we were being so haphazard. Now we've got some focus, we've got some structure. And obviously, depending on how people score, it depends on the next steps, and you can put your approach plans together. But it's really important for leadership teams as well to understand that we're not just pushing paper around for the sake of it.
Yeah.
There is a methodology behind this, and these are the number of prospects we're now ready to ask. We're targeting X amount. These are our next stage, and it really gives trustees, governors, other volunteer leaders confidence that we have a plan and we know where we're going with this.
And that also helps with patience, because that's another challenge very often. We get brought in and clients expect money to arrive the next day.
They do.
It doesn't happen like that. But if you plan properly, it may take a month to plan it, but the actual ask is therefore that much quicker. So the end result could well be quicker than you anticipated. But to be able to present things in a very structured, focused way, I think puts everybody at ease, as Amy says, to say, okay, we are doing this now, we're going to do this the right way. And the other factor in this is that major donors very often appreciate that you're doing it the right way, because these are very often very successful business people who like to see something sensible. And when a good, sensible fundraising plan with good structure, good prospect identification, good prospect evaluation is exactly what they like to see, because it reassures them that this is a client worth supporting.
That's a very good point. And it not only helps focus campaign management effort, but also keeps, as you say, your campaign executive focused on who to ask next and for how much, and also the intermediate cultivation steps for the other prospects that you need to bring on, or research that you need to understand better this prospect and where they're at before you could go and ask.
And in an ideal world, if you've got the right team in place and you've got your top 50 prospects, then you have 50 different individual cultivation plans. These aren't extensive. It could be 4 or 5 bullet points, but if you stick to those and go through that process, you have the opportunity with 50 people who've all been identified as major gift prospects to be able to say, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, now we can. And it comes back to what's again in the book, those 5 stages of asking, that actually, that final piece is the will you now join me? Have you heard enough? Will you join me? And we know, we've been doing this a long time between us, we know that more often than not, thankfully, properly cultivated individuals will go, yeah, I'm in, count me in.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Chris and Amy, for coming together for coffee today, and we had a great conversation around who to ask, when and for how much. And I should just wrap up and say the big challenge in any sort of fundraising is understanding the difference between those things that are important, as I said at the outset, and those things that are urgent. And by following this simple process, you can focus on the urgent asks that need to be completed and are ready to be made to get your campaign started, moving and growing. But thanks for your time. We hope you found that helpful. There's more gifted conversations to follow. Bye. Thanks for pulling up a chair and joining our conversation today. Please share any comments or even pose some questions for future episodes by emailing us at inquiries@giftedphilanthropy.com.